The Cursed Princess and the Unbreakable Human. The vast Therian Empire stretched across the galaxy, ruling over 100 planets with unmatched power. At its heart stood the grand palace of Princess Zyra, the most beautiful and mysterious royal in the universe. But no suitor, no warrior, and no king dared to claim her. Because of the curse, anyone who touched her died instantly. For years, the empire searched for a cure. Scientists, priests, and even the most powerful telepaths had failed. Many tried. All of them perished. Now, the empire was desperate. And that was when Captain Elias Kane arrived, the man who feared nothing. Elias was not a prince. He was not a noble. He was a human mercenary, known for surviving the impossible. He had walked through fire, fought against monsters, and won battles where others had fallen. He had no royal blood, no great riches, just a sharp mind, fast hands, and an iron will. When the emperor summoned him, Elias listened with a smirk. "You want me to break a curse?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. The emperor's face was stone. "If you succeed, you will be rewarded with anything you desire. A fleet, a planet, a new life." Elias chuckled. "I don't want a planet. I want a challenge." The emperor's eyes darkened. "Then you will have one, if you fail." "I know," Elias interrupted. "I die." He stood, rolling his shoulders. "All right, let's meet this princess. A dangerous beauty." The moment Elias stepped into the grand chamber, he felt something strange in the air. It was like electricity, a deep hum in his bones. And then he saw her. Princess Zyra sat on her throne, dressed in shimmering silver robes, her dark violet eyes watching him with cold curiosity. Her long, midnight black hair fell like silk over her shoulders. She was breathtaking, and she was cursed. Zyra's voice was soft but sharp. "You should leave, human. I don't want to kill another man." Elias grinned. "Good news, princess. I don't plan on dying today." Zyra's eyes flickered with something. Annoyance. Amusement. "You think you are different?" she asked. Elias took a step closer. The guards stiffened, their hands on their weapons. The air felt heavier, charged with unseen power. "Yeah," Elias said. "I think I am." Zyra studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "I have been touched before," she whispered. "And every time, they screamed, they fell, and they never got back up." Elias tilted his head. "And what if I don't fall?" Zyra's fingers curled into fists. "Then we will both find out what truly lies behind this curse." The first test. The Empire's greatest minds had tried everything. Shields, gloves, force fields. Nothing worked. The moment skin touched skin, the victim collapsed, lifeless. But Elias had a different plan. "Let me touch you," he said. The royal advisors gasped. The emperor stood up, furious. "You dare." But Zyra raised her hand, silencing the room. Her eyes burned into Elias. "No tricks?" she asked. "No tricks," Elias said. Zyra's breath slowed. Then, very carefully, she removed one glove. Her bare hand hovered in the air. Elias reached out. The moment their fingertips brushed, a blast of energy exploded between them. Elias was thrown back, crashing against the floor. Pain ripped through his body. The entire room shook as if the palace itself was screaming. Gasps echoed around the chamber. The emperor's voice rang out. "He's dead. Call the healers." But then, Elias moved. He groaned, blinking against the pain. He was still alive. Zyra stared at him, shocked. "No one has ever survived that," she whispered. Elias sat up, rubbing his head. His breath was heavy, but he grinned. "Well, princess," he said, "looks like I'm full of surprises." But deep inside, he felt something terrifying. In that moment of contact, something had awakened. A memory. a voice from the past, and it whispered a name that sent chills through his soul. Eldari, a dangerous experiment. The chamber was silent. Everyone stared at Elias Kane, the man who should be dead. He stood, shaking off the burning pain that still crackled through his body. His breath was heavy, his muscles ached, but he was alive. Princess Xyra's violet eyes were wide with disbelief. No one has ever survived. The Emperor's voice was sharp. Guards, restrain him. Elias raised an eyebrow. That's a little rude. I just proved I'm tougher than your curse, and this is my reward. The guards hesitated, unsure. No one had ever seen this before. Every other person who had touched Xyra had died instantly. Elias had survived. Something had changed. Something was different. And Xyra could feel it, deep in her bones. Theories and doubts. The royal scientists rushed into the chamber, their machines humming as they scanned Elias. His body radiated traces of the same energy that had always surrounded Xyra. He absorbed part of the curse, one scientist whispered. No, that's impossible. Another argued. The curse destroys. It does not share its power. Xyra sat still, her mind racing. She looked at Elias, this human mercenary, this reckless man, and felt something pulling at her memory. She had never seen him before. And yet, something about him felt familiar. Tell me, she said, standing. Why did you come here? Elias exhaled. I like a challenge. Xyra studied him. That's a lie. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. The Emperor leaned forward. Then let us put him to the test. Elias turned. Another test. I already passed the touch the cursed princess and live exam. What's next? The Emperor's eyes gleamed. You survived for a moment. But can you survive longer? The next experiment. Elias stood in the center of the royal laboratory, stripped of his weapons and armor. Around him, a team of scientists, priests, and warriors prepared for the test. Xyra stood across from him, her hands clenched. You don't have to do this. Elias smirked. You worried about me, princess. Her voice was soft. No, I'm worried about what will happen if you fail. Elias shrugged. Well, let's find out. Xyra stepped forward. This time, they would not stop at just a fingertip touch. This time, Elias would hold her hand. The lead scientist nodded. On your mark. Elias flexed his fingers. His heart pounded. Xyra hesitated. For the first time in years, she was afraid. But she forced herself forward. Their hands met. The shockwave. The moment their skin pressed together, a pulse of energy exploded outward. Elias's vision flashed white. His mind burned. He saw images, memories that did not belong to him. A city of silver towers, floating above the clouds. A battlefield of shattered stars. A man with his face, dressed in armor unlike anything he had ever seen. And beside him, Xyra, not as a princess, not as a stranger, but as someone he had once known. Then the visions vanished. Elias gasped, falling to his knees. The air was still humming, filled with ancient energy that swirled around them both. Xyra stood frozen, her hand still in his. Her eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with understanding. You saw it, didn't you? She whispered. Elias nodded, breathing hard. What? What the hell was that? The Emperor stood, his voice shaking. What did you see? Elias looked at Xyra. I saw us. Somewhere else. Somewhere before. Xyra exhaled. Then it's true. She looked at her father, then back at Elias. The curse isn't just magic, she whispered. It's a lock. A dangerous truth. The room was silent. Elias still felt the energy in his blood, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Xyra clenched her fists. The moment you touched me, it triggered something. The curse isn't just about keeping people away from me. Elias's mind raced. It's about keeping something inside you. Zyra nodded. I think I am not just cursed. She looked at Elias. I think I am sealed. The Emperor's face was grim. We must stop the experiments at once. Elias shook his head. No, we're finally getting answers. The Emperor's voice was hard. You don't understand. If she is sealed, then whatever was locked away inside her must never be released. Zyra's voice was barely a whisper. But what if the seal is failing? The forbidden passed. The room was silent. Elias Kane still felt the energy humming in his blood. His fingertips tingled where he had touched Princess Zyra, and his mind was buzzing with echoes of memories that did not belong to him. Across from him, Zyra stood frozen, her violet eyes locked on his. You saw it, didn't you? She whispered. Elias nodded slowly. Yeah, and I don't think we're supposed to. The Emperor's voice was sharp. What did you see? Elias hesitated. If he spoke the truth, what would they do? Would they lock him up? Kill him? Would they erase his memories? Because what he had seen, it was impossible. He had seen himself. In another time. Another life. Fighting a war he did not remember. And standing beside him in that past was Kyra, the shadow of the Eldari. The Emperor's advisors rushed forward, scanning Elias with glowing machines, whispering to each other in frantic tones. This is unnatural. The curse should have killed him. He is human. How can this be? Elias ignored them. His eyes were still on Zyra. You said the curse was a lock, he murmured. A seal. Zyra nodded. That's what I think. And when I touched you, something changed. Elias ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, I noticed. But something didn't add up. If this was a lock, then what was inside it? What was so dangerous that it had to be sealed within a living person? Then Zyra whispered two words that made the entire room stop breathing. The Eldari. The Emperor's face darkened. The guards shifted uneasily. The scientists froze. Elias frowned. Who? No one spoke. Zyra turned to him. Come with me. The Hall of Forbidden Knowledge. Zyra led Elias down a secret passageway, away from the throne room. The walls were ancient, covered in glowing symbols that pulsed softly as they walked. Elias noticed her fingers twitching. She was nervous. All right, princess, he said, keeping his voice light. Who are the Eldari? And why does everyone act like you just said a cursed word? Zyra sighed. Because in this empire, the Eldari do not exist. Elias raised an eyebrow. That's a weird way to say their name. Then, she stopped in front of a massive sealed door, placing her hand on a glowing panel. The door rumbled before sliding open, revealing a dark chamber filled with holograms and ancient scrolls. Elias stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. What is this place? Zyra's voice was soft. The Hall of Forbidden Knowledge. Elias exhaled. Well, that sounds ominous. She led him to a glowing archive, and suddenly, the air filled with shifting holograms, moving images of war, destruction, and massive alien beings clad in ethereal armor. Zyra pointed at the figures. The Eldari were the first rulers of the galaxy. Before humans, before the Therian Empire, they were more than conquerors. They were gods. Elias watched as the images showed entire worlds bending before them, kneeling in worship. They ruled with power beyond anything we understand. They could shape reality, control time, destroy planets with a thought. Elias frowned. And what happened to them? Zyra swallowed. They disappeared, or so we thought. She turned to him, her violet eyes filled with something close to fear. But the truth is, they weren't destroyed. Elias felt a chill run through him. They were sealed. The truth about Zyra. Elias stared at Zyra. What are you saying? Zyra clenched her fists. I think I am one of them. Elias blinked. Excuse me. Zara took a deep breath. I've always felt different. My power, my curse, it never made sense. And when I touched you, it was like something inside me was waking up. Elias rubbed his face. Okay, so let's say that's true. Let's say you are part Eldari or something. Why would they seal you? Zara hesitated. Elias narrowed his eyes. There's something you're not telling me. Zara looked away. Because I don't know if it's safe to tell you. Elias took a step closer. Princess, I just touched you and lived. If anyone has a right to the truth, it's me. She sighed, then whispered. Because the Eldari were not just rulers. They were destroyers. And I think I was meant to be the greatest of them all. A dangerous choice. Elias exhaled. His heart pounded. So let me get this straight, he said. Your curse is actually some kind of ancient lock. That lock is keeping something inside you, and that something is connected to an extinct race of godlike beings who may or may not have wanted to destroy the universe. Zara bit her lip. Yes. Elias sighed. Fantastic. They stood in silence. Then Zara whispered, I don't know what happens if the seal breaks completely. Elias frowned. Well, we already cracked it a little. What if we break it all the way? Zara tensed. You want to. Elias crossed his arms. Not really. But we might not have a choice. Zara's voice was quiet. Why? Elias hesitated, but then he admitted what he had been feeling since their first touch. Because whatever this is, it's waking up. The curse breaks, but the moment Zara's eyes turned gold, the entire palace shook. Elias barely had time to react before the walls around them cracked, sending stone and dust raining from above. The ancient symbols carved into the chamber flared to life, their glow shifting from blue to a deep fiery red. And then Zara screamed. Not in pain, not in fear, but in power. The energy pouring from her body was like a storm, an invisible force that sent objects flying across the room. The holograms flickered violently, distorting and showing visions of another world, a place lost in time. Elias grabbed Zara's shoulders, shaking her. Zara, snap out of it. But her face was blank, her golden eyes staring into nothing. And then she spoke, but the voice that came from her lips was not hers, the voice of the Eldari. The time has come, the voice said, deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. The seal is broken. The Eldari shall return. Elias's blood ran cold. The voice was ancient, powerful. It was not a person. It was something else. The emperor and his guards rushed in, stopping at the sight of Zara floating in the air, golden energy crackling around her. One of the royal scientists gasped, stumbling backward. No, this isn't possible. The emperor's face was pale. The Eldari, they still exist. Elias ignored them. His grip on Zara tightened. Zara, he shouted over the roaring energy. If you're still in there, fight this. Don't let it take over. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Zara gasped. Her golden eyes flickered, shifting between the ancient glow and her natural violet. She clutched Elias's arms, her breathing ragged. Elias. Her voice was weak, but it was hers. It's trying to take control. I can't. Elias shook his head. Yes, you can. You're stronger than this. The voice inside her snarled. You are nothing but a speck, human. You do not understand what she truly is. Elias bared his teeth. Yeah, then why are you afraid of me? A long silence. Then the energy around them collapsed in a violent burst. Zara collapsed into Elias's arms, her body trembling. The golden glow in her eyes faded. But the air in the room felt different. The seal wasn't just cracked. It was gone. The truth about the curse. Zara's breathing slowed. She pressed a hand to her forehead, shaking. It's over. Elias frowned. Is it? The Emperor approached cautiously. Is she still herself? Zira met his gaze. Yes, father. The Emperor exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. Then we end the experiments here. No more risks. Elias narrowed his eyes. No more risks? Are you serious? We just unlocked something no one understands. You think we can pretend it didn't happen? The Emperor glared at him. You are not a ruler of this empire, human. You do not decide what happens next. Elias took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Then let me tell you something as the only person who's actually survived touching her. He looked at Tyra. Your curse wasn't a curse. It was a containment field. Someone, a long time ago, locked something away inside you. And now, his voice dropped lower. Now it's free. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Syra bit her lip. But I still feel like myself. The Emperor nodded. Then we will move forward as planned. You will still rule as princess. You will. Syra shook her head. No, it's not that simple. She turned back to Elias. I think we need to find out who did this to me. And why. Elias smirked. Now you're talking. The hunt for the lost truth. The Emperor was furious when Syra declared that she would leave the palace. You are the heir to the empire, he shouted. You cannot simply. Father. Syra's voice was calm but firm. I cannot rule an empire if I do not even know who I really am. The Emperor's jaw tightened. And what if you are something dangerous? Syra looked down at her hands. Then wouldn't you rather I find out now, before it's too late? A heavy silence. Finally, the Emperor turned to Elias. His eyes were cold. You will protect her. Elias shrugged. Yeah, I planned on it anyway. The Emperor's voice was like steel. If she loses control, if this power consumes her, you will end it. Syra flinched. Elias didn't. He met the Emperor's gaze. I don't plan on letting that happen. The Emperor said nothing. Then he turned away. Do what you must. Leaving the palace. Later that night, Tyra and Elias stood on a private docking platform. The Empire had given them a single ship, nothing more. It was sleek, fast, built for stealth. Elias leaned against the hull. So where do we even start? Syra adjusted the gloves over her hands, her expression distant. There's an old legend, she said, about a lost world at the edge of the galaxy. The place where the Eldari made their last stand. Elias raised an eyebrow. And you think we'll find answers there? Syra turned to him, her violet eyes unreadable. I think we'll find the truth. Elias smirked. Well, princess, I hope you're ready for an adventure. Syra gave a small, sad smile. I think I always have been. The ship's engines roared to life. The stars stretched before them, endless and unknown. As they lifted off, neither of them noticed the silent figure standing on a distant tower, watching them go. And in the darkness, unseen by all, the golden glow of Eldari eyes flickered once more. The return of the Eldari. The ship hummed softly, its sleek metal hull cutting through the vast emptiness of space. Elias Kane leaned back in the pilot's chair, his boots propped up on the console as he stared out at the stars. Syra sat across from him, lost in thought. She had barely spoken since they left the palace. Elias watched her carefully. The golden glow that had flickered in her eyes back in the palace was gone, but something had changed. She felt different, more aware, more powerful, more dangerous. The edge of the known galaxy. Their destination was Zephyrian 9, an abandoned world at the farthest edge of the Empire. Syra had called it a lost world, a place forgotten by history. But Elias had his doubts. You sure about this? He asked, breaking the silence. Syra nodded. It's the only lead we have. The last place the Eldari were seen before they disappeared. Elias sighed. Right. And you think we'll just walk into some ancient ruins and find a nice little book that explains why you had a death touch curse? Zyra smirked. I don't think the answers will come that easily. No. Elias shrugged. Good, because nothing in my life ever has. Landing on Zephyrian 9. The moment they entered Zephyrian's atmosphere, the ship's sensors went crazy. Up, princess. Elias tapped the flickering screens. This planet is supposed to be abandoned, right? Zyra frowned. Yes. Why? Elias gestured to the controls. Because I'm picking up energy signatures. Big ones. Zyra's expression darkened. That's impossible. Yeah? Well, so was touching you and living. But here we are. The ship descended toward the surface, cutting through thick, swirling clouds. Below them, ruins stretched across the landscape. Massive stone structures covered in glowing symbols, untouched for centuries. Except, some of the lights were still on. Elias narrowed his eyes. Something's not right. Zyra tightened her grip on the armrest. Be ready for anything. Elias smirked, flipping a switch. I'm always ready. The city of the dead and the living. The ruins were ancient, tall spires, crumbling temples, and vast underground tunnels carved into the mountain cliffs. But the deeper they walked, the clearer it became. This place wasn't dead. Something lived here. Elias kneeled, touching the ground. Fresh tracks. Zyra's eyes flickered. Who else would be here? Before Elias could answer, a voice echoed through the ruins. You should not have come. Elias spun, drawing his blaster. Okay, I hate it when that happens. A figure stepped from the shadows, clad in black and gold armor, their face hidden beneath a sleek helmet. Zyra's breath caught. An Eldari. The figure tilted its head. You are wrong, child. The helmet retracted, revealing a face shockingly similar to Zyra's. High cheekbones, violet eyes that flickered with gold, silver markings glowing faintly against her skin. We were never gone. We have been waiting. Zyra took a step forward. Waiting for what? The woman's eyes locked onto Elias. For him. Elias raised an eyebrow. Oh, great. Me again. Elias's forgotten past. The Eldari woman's gaze was unreadable. You do not know what you are, do you? She asked. Elias crossed his arms. I'm a mercenary who keeps getting pulled into insane situations. That about covers it. The woman smiled faintly. No, you are much more than that. She gestured toward Tyra. You touched her and survived. You awakened her power, and now the seal is broken. Tyra tensed. You mean the curse? The woman shook her head. It was never a curse. It was a lock. A lock that you, Elias Kane, were meant to open. Elias clenched his fists. Why me? The woman stepped closer. Because you were once one of us. Silence fell. Elias felt his pulse pound in his ears. That's impossible. The Eldari woman extended a hand, and suddenly, Elias's mind exploded with memories. Visions of the past. Elias was no longer standing in the ruins. He was somewhere else. Somewhere ancient. He saw himself, but not as he was now. His face was the same, but his armor was different, crafted from shimmering gold and deep black metal. A long-bladed weapon rested at his side, and standing beside him was Kyra. But she wasn't a princess. She was a warrior. A queen. The memory rushed through him like fire. A battlefield. A war against something terrible. Zyra had been the strongest of the Eldari. The leader. But her power had been too great. Unstable. Dangerous. And Elias. He had been the one to seal her away. The awakening of the Eldari. Elias stumbled back into reality, gasping for breath. The Eldari woman watched him closely. You remember now, don't you? She said softly. Elias's heart pounded. I sealed her. Thyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. You knew. Elias shook his head. No, I swear, I didn't. But deep inside, something felt right, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. The Eldari woman smiled. The cycle is beginning again. She turned to Kyra. Your power will awaken fully soon. And when it does, you must decide. Her eyes darkened. Will you save this galaxy? She glanced at Elias. Or will you destroy it? The final war. The truth hung heavy between them. Zira was no ordinary princess. She was a weapon, a force of nature, a being so powerful that even her own kind had chosen to lock her away rather than risk her awakening. And Elias, he had been the one to seal her in the past. The knowledge burned inside him. Memories whispered at the edges of his mind. Flashes of a war fought across the stars, of battles waged against something so terrible, so vast, that the Eldari themselves had nearly been wiped from existence. Now, standing in the ruins of Zephyrian 9, he felt the weight of that past pressing down on him. And the worst part, the war wasn't over. It was just beginning again. The Eldari's warning. The Eldari woman, Solara, watched them both carefully. You have little time, she said. Elias exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, figured that much. Solara ignored him, turning to Kyra. Your power is still locked, but not for much longer. When it fully awakens, there will be no stopping it. The Empire will fear you. The galaxy will hunt you. And the enemy we fought so long ago will return to claim you. Zyra's voice was calm, but her hands clenched into fists. Who are they? Solara's expression darkened. The Voidborn. The name sent a chill through the air. Even the ruins seemed to whisper in response, the very stones remembering the horrors of the past. Elias frowned. I'm guessing they're the bad guys. Solara nodded. They are worse than anything you can imagine. She gestured to the glowing symbols carved into the walls. The Eldari once ruled the stars, but we were never alone. The Voidborn were our shadows, beings that fed on destruction, chaos, and entropy. They did not build. They did not create. They only consumed. Elias crossed his arms, and I'm guessing they wanted Kyra. Solara's gaze flickered. Not just her. They wanted her power. They wanted to use her as their vessel. Zyra's breath hitched. That's why I was sealed away. Solara nodded. Yes, it was the only way to stop them. Elias frowned. And now? Solara looked at him. Now the seal is broken. The Voidborn have felt her presence again. Zyra inhaled sharply. They're coming. Solara's eyes gleamed. They are already here. The sky burns. A distant rumble shook the ruins. Elias turned toward the sky. His heart stopped. Above them, the clouds split apart, revealing a sight that sent a chill down his spine. Massive ships. Not the sleek silver of the Therian Empire. Not the ancient black and gold of the Eldari. These ships were wrong. Jagged, shifting shapes, dark as the void itself, pulsing with an unnatural, sickly red light. And then came the screams. A sound like 1,000 voices whispering in unison. A sound that crawled into Elias's bones. Zyra's face paled. They've come for me. Solara's eyes flashed. Then it is time to fight. She raised her hand and suddenly, the ruins came to life. The Battle of Zephyrian 9. From the ground, ancient Eldari sentinels began to rise. Stone warriors carved from forgotten times, glowing with golden light. Elias grinned. Now we're talking. Solara turned to him. You were once one of us, Cain. Do you remember how to fight? Elias smirked, cracking his knuckles. Let's find out. The Voidborn descended. Shadowy figures poured from the sky, landing in the ruins with a force that shattered the stone beneath them. Their bodies were twisted, shifting constantly between forms, humanoid one moment, monstrous the next. Zyra's eyes glowed violet. Power crackled in her hands. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Elias versus the Voidborn. Elias didn't wait. The moment the first Voidborn lunged at him, he moved. Instinct took over, memories of another life guiding his hands. He dodged left, twisted, and drove his fist straight into the creature's chest. Shock spread across its face. Then, its body exploded into black mist. Elias stared at his hand. Guess I do remember how to fight. But there was no time to think. More Voidborn rushed at him. He grabbed a fallen Eldari blade from the ground, a long curved weapon that felt familiar in his hands. Then he charged. Zyra's awakening. Zyra fought beside him, her movements graceful and deadly. She didn't need a weapon. She was the weapon. With every strike, golden light surged from her hands, disintegrating the Voidborn on contact. But then, the sky darkened. A new presence arrived. Something bigger. Something worse. A massive shadow loomed above them, descending from the largest Voidborn ship. And then, a figure stepped forward. Unlike the others, this one did not shift. It had a face. A cold, beautiful, inhuman face. Its eyes burned red. And when it spoke, its voice was smooth as silk, sharp as knives. At last, it purred, staring directly at Zyra. The queen of the Eldari awakens. Zyra's breath caught. Elias raised his blade. Who the hell are you? The Voidborn smiled. I am the one who will finish what was started. He lifted a hand, and everything exploded into darkness. One bold kiss to save the universe. The battlefield was chaos. The ruins of Zephyrian 9 burned, consumed by fire and shadow. Eldari warriors, long thought extinct, clashed against the horrifying forces of the Voidborn. Their golden energy clashed against the sickly red-black mist of their enemies. But all of it, the war, the death, the destruction, became background noise in the face of what stood before them. A figure clad in shifting black armor walked toward them, moving like a shadow that had taken form. His glowing red eyes never left Zyra. Elias tightened his grip on his Eldari blade, but the stranger barely spared him a glance. You do not matter, Cain, the Voidborn whispered, his voice impossibly smooth. This has always been about her. Elias smirked. Yeah, well, that's too bad, because she's got a thing for me. The Voidborn smiled. It was a terrible thing. Empty, cold, hungry. And that is why you must die first. And then he moved. The last duel. Elias barely saw him coming. One moment, the Voidborn stood yards away. The next, he was there. A fist slammed into Elias's chest, sending him flying back through the ruins. He hit the ground hard, coughing as pain lanced through his ribs. Damn, that hurt. Zyra gasped and raised her hands, golden energy flaring around her. She threw a wave of pure power at the Voidborn, but he vanished, slipping between dimensions like a shadow in the dark. He reappeared behind her. You were meant to rule at my side, Zyra. That was always your fate. Zyra spun, her energy coiling into a blast of pure light. I choose my own fate. The blast struck true, but the Voidborn barely flinched. His red eyes gleamed. Do you? Or does Cain choose it for you? Elias gritted his teeth. I'm getting real tired of you saying my name like I don't belong in this fight. The Voidborn turned to him, his smile widening. You were never meant to exist. You are an error, a mistake. Elias spat blood and got back to his feet. Buddy, I'm the best mistake this galaxy ever made. He raised his blade. The final fight began. Elias versus the darkness. Elias charged, his Eldari blade singing through the air. The Voidborn met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a blinding explosion of energy. Every swing, every block, every counterstrike sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The ground cracked beneath their feet. The sky itself shuddered. Elias fought like he had in the past. He wasn't just a mercenary anymore. He was a warrior reborn. The Voidborn snarled, pressing forward, You are strong, Cain, but you cannot win. Elias smirked, ducking under a deadly strike and slicing a deep gash across the Voidborn's side. Maybe not, he admitted, but I don't have to beat you. I just have to hold you off. The Voidborn's eyes narrowed. Why? And then he realized. Elias had only been the distraction. Zira had been charging up her power the whole time. Thyra's true power. Golden light exploded from Thyra, sending the Voidborn staggering back. The battlefield froze, both sides momentarily stunned by the sheer force of what was happening. The energy pulsed around her, growing brighter, unstoppable. The seal was completely broken now. She was no longer a cursed princess. She was the queen of the Eldari. The Voidborn's expression twisted into something almost like fear. You cannot control it. That power will consume you. Zyra's violet eyes met Elias's. She was calm, steady. I know how to control it now. The answer had always been there. The balance. The key. She turned to Elias. You. Elias blinked. Wait. What? She took a slow step toward him. You are the reason I can control it. The Voidborn lunged, desperate. No. But he was too late. Zira grabbed Elias and kissed him. One bold kiss to save the universe. The moment their lips met, the galaxy changed. Power exploded outward, wrapping around them both in a whirlwind of light and shadow. The Voidborn screamed, caught in the blast. Time itself shattered, unraveling and reforming in an instant. Elias felt himself slipping. His mind pulled through every lifetime he had ever lived. He saw the first war against the Voidborn. The moment he had chosen to seal Thyra away. The moment he had promised to find her again. And now, here they were. The cycle was breaking. As the energy around them reached its peak, Elias whispered against her lips, "Come back to me." And Thyra whispered back, "Always." And then, everything went white. Aftermath. A new beginning. Elias woke up to the sound of silence. For a moment, he thought he was dead. Then he blinked up at the sky. Clear, blue, filled with stars. Zyra was beside him, her breathing slow and steady. The ruins of Zephyrian 9 were still bathed in golden light. The Voidborn, gone. The war, over. Elias sat up, rubbing his head. Okay, that was a lot. Zyra stirred, turning to look at him. We did it. Elias smirked. I mean, I did most of the work. Zyra rolled her eyes. You got punched across a battlefield. Elias shrugged. Still counts. She smiled. A real smile, one filled with freedom. For the first time in her life, she was free. No curse, no lock, no war waiting in the shadows, just the stars ahead of them. Zyra reached out, lacing her fingers through Elias. So, what now? Elias grinned. Now. He pointed toward the endless cosmos. Now we find our next adventure. And together, they stepped forward into the future.